to introduce our speaker. Our speaker is a young fella, young to me, Chris Ashcraft. I'm looking around. Chris, where did you hide? Oh, there you are, off center. Chris is talking today about dinosaurs, lost world of the Bible. Chris, I've known him probably now for 5 years, at least. Lives up in the Seattle area, teaches in a Christian high school in the Seattle area. Former geneticist by training. Sharp guy, real techno-savvy. Chris, come up and tell us about how dinosaurs are the lost world of the Bible.
All right, thank
Give
you,
him a hand.
All right, thank you, Howard. Stayed with Howard again last night. Got in kind of late, kept him up jawing all night, so forgive us if we're a little slow today. Let's go to the Father one more time, a word of prayer. Dear Father, we thank you so much, and we just praise you, Father, for who you are, for being the creator of the universe, for being our loving Father, for loving us so much to create this wonderful world for us. And we thank you for sending us your word that gives us so much insight into the world that we live in. Father, we praise you, we thank you, we love you, Father. In Christ's name we ask, amen. All right, so going to talk a bit about dinosaurs today. I think probably one of the most common questions people are asked, that, you know, if you're a young earth creationist, as I am, this question is very, very common. You know, how do the dinosaurs fit in then? Even when you explain to someone that the fossil record is a result of the global flood of Noah, they might be able to accept that, but then they still have that lingering question, you know, then how do the dinosaurs fit in? Because we've been taught so much about dinosaurs, they become real popular, you know, a lot of movie time last couple of decades, and they become really, really popular, and there are just tons of educational documentaries out there from the Discovery Channel and whatnot on dinosaurs, so people know a lot about dinosaurs. Unfortunately, the vast majority of what has been taught is wrong. The true history of the dinosaurs has just been lost to us. And I think it's a good example of how worldviews affect people. Despite overwhelming evidence of dinosaurs, that dinosaurs lived recently, all of this evidence, they just overlook it. They're blind to all of that. They're so dedicated to their worldview, to their interpretation of fossils and rocks, that the evidence to the contrary is just overlooked and dismissed as being fictitious. And so much of what the true history of dinosaurs is being seen as fictitious or mythological today, that the whole true history of dinosaurs has been lost. So, assuming you as well will end up being asked these kinds of questions. If you don't have them yourself, you will be asked them at some point, and hopefully today we can give you some of those answers. So when someone asks you, well, what about the dinosaurs? You'll be prepared to give them some of those answers, okay? So I think you'll find this interesting. Even if you already heard all the creationist perspective on dinosaurs, I can pretty much guarantee you some of what you're going to hear today is new, okay? Because I spent a couple of months researching this last summer, gave this talk for the first time at the Seattle Creation Conference last year. But I tend to immerse myself pretty heavily in a subject when I'm researching it. And so, found some really cool stuff looking into this subject. Okay? Before I get rolling completely, though, I want to talk about worldviews just for a little bit. Because this is really, really important. Because when we're talking about dinosaurs, we're really talking, you know, geological, paleontological kind of stuff. Okay, because what we know of dinosaurs, most of their fossils were embedded in these rock layers, and so the interpretation of those rock layers heavily affect the interpretation of dinosaurs, or the history of dinosaurs as they're perceived. So one of the things we've got to remember when we look at geology, things like this, there's two ways of interpreting a formation like this, Monument Valley, Utah. Okay, all of the rock that's in this area is sandstone. It's a reworked rock, meaning rock that disintegrated in one location, was transported, and then all of those particulates, those sediments, were deposited in another location and eventually became rock. So at some point, all of this sand that was in this area that became sandstone was deposited there by some process. And it was once upon a time at least as high as these monuments. Something put all of that sandstone there, some geological process, some events, and then something eroded away all of that rock that was there. And you can interpret that one of two ways. Either it was put there slowly and gradually over hundreds of millions of years, and then it was eroded away slowly and gradually over equivalent lengths of time, or it was put there rapidly and or eroded rapidly. And in my opinion, a rapid erosion is a much more plausible explanation, especially since all that material's gone. That's a lot of material that's now completely gone. Unless we're talking about a rapid sweep away, it's really kind of hard to explain. Layers of rocks fall into the same, situation. The Earth is covered in these vast, vast layers of rocks. And either these layers formed slowly and gradually over hundreds of millions of years, or they formed rapidly during a catastrophic event like the global flood of Noah. And generally speaking, creationists, young Earth creationists, believe that the fossil record, these layers of rocks and the fossils that they contain, were laid down rapidly during the global flood of Noah. Okay? But there's an important point that I want to try to help you to understand. It's not that geologists don't recognize that catastrophic processes have been a part of formations of some of these things. It's not that they're blind to the fact that these layers are vast, vast, vast and cover basically entire continents. The evidence for the global flood is overwhelming. But it's impossible for them to reach that interpretation. It's not that they can't see it. I mean, you kind of would assume that if there had been a global flood, and that left monumental evidence of that event, that someone looking at that evidence would be able to interpret that, right? Seems logical. If it happened and the evidence is there, a geologist, a person that's studying these rock layers, extensively would be able to reach that conclusion. But I say to you that it's impossible. It's not that they can't see it. It's impossible, based on their philosophical worldview, to interpret those layers of rocks and the fossils they contain as a result of a global flood. It's not that they don't want to, it's just they can't. They're prevented. Your philosophical worldview fixes you to a certain perspective, and oftentimes it's incompatible with the evidence. Okay, so let me see if I can explain this a little better, because it's not obvious why they can't. I say it's impossible. Their position prevents them from the correct interpretation. Remember that they're not just looking at those layers of rocks and trying to interpret them, but they're looking at the world as it now exists. And on top of all of those layers, there's life. Lots and lots of fragile life living on top of those layers of rocks. Little butterflies and amphibians, lots of cold-blooded animals, very environmentally sensitive animals are living on top of those layers of rocks. And there's only two possible explanations. Either the life that lives on top of those rocks survived the formation of those rocks on their own, which for that to happen means that those layers formed so slowly and so gradually that all of the life that's around today was able to survive it. So it had to form that slowly and that gradually. A little flood here, maybe, a little flood over here. Eventually, the whole place got covered in rock, Or if it formed massively during a global catastrophe, a catastrophe able to deposit all of those layers, nothing could have survived it, right? Nothing could have done that. But the Bible says there was such an event. And the only reason life exists today is because of an act of supernatural intervention, period. If you're trying to interpret our world through philosophical naturalism, it precludes or prevents an interpretation of the world that relies upon a supernatural event. The only way the geological record could be correctly interpreted is if you're willing to say that there was an act of supernatural intervention to explain the existence of life on top of those rocks. Do you understand? That was a little bit long-winded of an explanation, but it's a very, very important point. They cannot reach the correct interpretation. They're holding to a position of philosophical naturalism, yet we live in a world with this supernatural history. You cannot interpret a world with this supernatural history through rigid philosophical naturalism. And that's exactly what scientists try to do today. So they're lost. They cannot reach the correct interpretation. Okay? And when we come down to dinosaurs, basically the same thing kind of fits in there. We're trying to interpret now dinosaurs from a different worldview. I say they cannot correctly interpret the history of dinosaurs for those same reasons. The geological record that we have cannot be interpreted by itself. Life exists on top of that. Life that only exists because of an act of supernatural intervention. They cannot correctly interpret the fossil record, therefore they cannot correctly interpret the history of dinosaurs either. And because, so one of the things that's very, very critical to understand, based on the Bible, if we're going to derive a truth using the Bible as our starting document, then there's one inescapable conclusion, okay? The Bible describes this global flood, right? And in this description of this event, it says that the animals that are alive today were saved from this event through an act of supernatural intervention. God brought all of those animals and put them on board the ark, and 2 of every type of animal were put on board the ark. It specifically says 2 of every type of animal were put on board the ark. Because dinosaurs are an overwhelming part of the fossil record, if the fossil record is a result of the global flood, then there's only one conclusion that we can draw. Dinosaurs were alive at the time of the flood, period. And because the Bible says that 2 of every kind of animal that were alive at the time of the flood were put on board the ark, the only conclusion we can reach there is that dinosaurs were also on board the ark, period. That's an inescapable conclusion from the Word of God, and if from our interpretation of the fossil record as being the result of the global flood, period. Dinosaurs were alive at the time of the flood. They were also put on board the ark and released afterwards. Okay? If that's true, then humans have always known about dinosaurs. They knew about them before the flood. They might not have lived in the exact same location, but legend alone would have carried word of them from one region to another. People have always known about dinosaurs. Before the flood and after the flood, people knew about dinosaurs. Okay? I think that's a conclusion that we must reach. Okay, so what are dinosaurs? Let's just start off talking just generally about dinosaurs, and then we'll get into some other kind of cool stuff. Okay, so what are dinosaurs? I know this graphic's a little bit hard to see, but just so you know, nothing in that picture is a dinosaur. Okay? So there's some other things like pterosaurs are the flying versions. Okay, there's a plesiosaur, there's a dimetrodon, and of course a woolly mammoth's a mammal. None of those are dinosaurs, okay? I mentioned a couple of them during the presentation. I just want to make sure you know that I know they're not dinosaurs, okay? But they're some of them kind of fit in the same group and, as far as extinct fossilized animals and stuff. But dinosaurs largely fit into 2 main groups, okay? And what they call the Saurischian and the Ornithischian dinosaurs, 2 main groups. Now, I do want to try to help you with your terminology a little bit. Basically, these 2 names are based on the types of hip structures that these animals have. S-A-U-R basically means lizard, and the ischian part is referring to a bone in the pelvis. Okay? So these are the lizard-hipped dinosaurs. Ornith, O-R-N-I-T-H, is bird. And so these are the bird-hipped dinosaurs. You've got the bird-hipped and the lizard-hipped dinosaurs, 2 main groups. And all the dinosaurs that we have fit into one or the other. Okay? The Saurischian dinosaurs and the Ornithischian dinosaurs, 2 main groups. Okay? So let's review just some of the major players in these 2 groups, starting off with the Saurischian dinosaurs, the lizard-hipped dinosaurs. Okay? You can start with the theropods, like this big monster. This is the group that the T-Rex, the Allosaurs all belong to, this group called the theropods. Their name means beast-footed. They're the ones with the great big 3-toed clawed feet, the beast-footed dinosaurs. This one is the Gigantosaurus. Ranged close to 50 feet in length, had a head 6 foot in length. This thing could reach down, pick you up, and pretty much swallow you whole. Theropod dinosaurs, okay? But they were not the largest. There's several theropod dinosaurs. The Gigantosaurus or the T-Rex weren't the largest. The largest of the big theropods was the Spinosaur. You can see the T-Rex is the blue one there, the average size of the T-Rex, right? The Gigantosaurus, the one we just saw, is that orange one. The Spinosaurus was even bigger. If you what was the name of the movie? There was a movie, Ice World, Dawn of the Dinosaurs. Did I get that right? Ice Age. I always get that wrong. Believe it or not, I must have got that wrong 3 times. One of these days, I'm going to put a note in there. It's the title of that movie. Okay, but you know the movie is an animated, cartoony kind of thing, right? You know the movie what is it? Ice Age. Ice Age, Dawn of the Dinosaurs. Okay. Anyway, there's a little sloth in there, and he eventually adopts 2 T-Rex babies that were hatched, and he's with them. And eventually, the mom starts chasing them because those are babies. And eventually, they befriend the big T-Rex, and now they're all kind of together, and they're being chased by another dinosaur. Another bigger predator, that's the Spinosaurus. And it's even got a name that's similar, like Spiny or something. But yeah, so there's even a bigger one than the ones that we think of as the biggest of the predatory dinosaurs, the T-Rex. Now the Tyrannosaurs, this is the distribution map of the Tyrannosaur dinosaurs. And oddly enough, most dinosaurs fit into a similar distribution pattern. This is a world map showing where the Tyrannosaurs, of which the Tyrannosaurus is one, so Tyrannosauridae family, Tyrannosaurus is the genus. These are where the Tyrannosaurs have been found. And all dinosaurs seem to fit into a similar pattern. The vast majority of dinosaur fossils have been found in North America. And some almost exclusively in North America. You'll find one, every once in a while they'll find one down here, every once in a while they'll find one down here, but usually they're even questionable. Okay, but very, very unusual, the distribution pattern. And I'll show you another example of that here in a second. Okay, so Tyrannosaurs. Then also in the Saurischian dinosaurs, there are the sauropods. Okay, like this big monster, the Diplodocus. What did I tell you that S-A-U-R meant? Lizard. So, and pod or poda means foot. There are a lot of names of animals are usually very descriptive. And there are a lot of names of animals that have pod in it. Gastropods are like the snails, and they have a stomach foot. Or cephalopods are like all your octopus and squid. Okay, that's a head-footed, And sauropods, lizard-footed. They're the ones that have, instead of the big three-toed, beast-footed dinosaurs, they have the five-toed feet that are very typical of generally of lizards. Okay, so lizard foot. This is the largest group of dinosaurs in the world. It was once thought that the blue whale, one of the whales, was the biggest animal. Now we know that one of these big Giganosaurs are actually the biggest dinosaur. You can see the scale of these things in comparison to the size of man. The largest that we know of, Supersaurus, it was 115 foot in length. 115 foot long. What's this building right now? About 115. Can you imagine, though? I would just have loved to have seen one of these things. Recently, I saw a documentary where it showed two giraffes. Giraffes kind of, when they're, I think it's probably a lot of dominance kind of jousting. The giraffes will kind of fight with their necks. And when I saw the size of the necks of these things, I kind of boy, can you imagine seeing a couple of these out in the field, jousting a little bit by banging their necks together like a giraffe? I don't know. I'm sure they would be very scary still, you know what I mean? Because we're just naturally kind of afraid of things, especially for whatever reptiles. But I would just have loved to have seen these things. Okay, so Saurischians, ornithischians are the lizard hips, and we'll go through a few of the ornithischians too. The Ankylosaur was one of the ornithischians. These are again the bird-hipped dinosaurs. Ankylosaur means stiff lizard. Okay, referring to the plates or scutes that it has on its back. Okay, it's not the only of the reptiles that has these large scutes or plates on its back, but it had these plates covering its back. Most of the ornithischian dinosaurs, the lizard-hipped dinosaurs, also had bird-like beaks. Okay, the vast majority, there may be an exception there. I'll look, the one that kind of had a duck bill, I'll show you one of those, but some of these also had a big club on the end of their tail, the Ankylosaur. Okay, these weren't big, as far as dinosaurs are concerned, only about 6 feet tall, only about, ranged from like 18 to 30 feet in length, so not exceptionally large, and probably one of the least terrifying as far as the dinosaurs are concerned. The Stegosaur means roofed lizard, so it's a lizard with a roof on it. That's what its name means, referring to the plates that are on its back. Other than like the T-Rex, the Stegosaurus is probably one of the most recognizable dinosaurs that there is, but pretty big, ranged around 30 feet in length, somewhere around 14 feet tall, so pretty big. Also, again, a bird's-like beak, ornithischian, the bird-like hips. The Ceratops means horned face. It's also one of the most recognizable types of dinosaurs. Of course, this is describing a whole group. The Triceratops had 3 horns. Okay, Triceratops. Okay, but this thing was pretty big too. Around 30, maxed out at around 30 feet in length, but ranged from about 6 to 30. Most of the animals that reached this size were able to run probably 30 to 40 miles an hour. Now, fastest human can probably run about 30 miles an hour. I don't know. I'd be significantly less than that. But, so these things could definitely run you down. And here's again the distribution range of a ceratops. Notice that the pattern fits what we saw before with the tyrannosaurs. Vast majority of your ceratops have been found in North America. And a few elsewhere, questionable, few over here, but very, very interesting distribution pattern we see. Again, these are the fossils. So those dinosaurs would have lived at the time of the global flood. So again, another ornithischian dinosaur, the hadrosaur. This is a duck-billed, one of the duck-billed versions. An artist's rendition or depiction of where they were thought to originally have lived. So because they have a duck bill, and today ducks use it for kind of patting their way through mud. So they kind of sift their way through mud, pick up a little bit of mud, and pat it a little bit like that, and get the plant particulates out of it or whatever. So it was thought they lived near the water. But examinations of stomach contents later revealed that these were actually mountain-dwelling creatures. And their name actually means big lizard. And for good reason. These things were enormous. It looked kind of cute in that other little picture. You probably would have thought, oh, that's not a cute little ducky-looking dinosaur. But look at the size of this thing. In comparison to Spinosaurus, Stegosaurus, Ceratops, this thing was enormous. Now, most of these were vegetarians or plant eaters, but still very, very scary. This thing reached 50 foot in length, or close to 5 tons. Okay, an absolutely enormous animal. Now, one of the big questions that paleontologists try to answer today is what happened to the dinosaurs? Arguably, without question, one of the most formidable animals that had ever lived on the planet Earth, this enormous group, today we just call them dinosaurs, which basically means terrible lizard, the dinosaurs, okay? What happened to these things? One of the most common explanations is that significant ecological shifts due to an asteroid bombardment probably played a part. Okay, but there are many theories trying to explain what happened to the dinosaurs. Another common explanation is that they actually evolved into birds. Okay, how such a significant or dramatic change occurred when Darwinian evolution proposes slow and gradual changes over a long period of time is still a question they're not able to answer. But there's some researchers have put forth a couple of theories. Now, I'm not saying this is absolutely the way it happened. I'm just, showing some research, and you can draw your own conclusions. I don't know. It's a possibility. That's all I'm saying. Possibility. Okay, but today, flight, the origin of flight is a complete mystery. Okay, now there are many, many animals that fly. No precursor or predecessor to these fully flighted animals have yet been found. They all, regardless of what you're talking about, birds, insects, whatnot, they all just appear fully formed in the fossil record. Some secular paleontologists speaking to this.
Evolution teaches that flying animals evolved from land animals, but new discoveries here in Germany are causing problems for this theory.
There's a 10 million year period of early mammal evolution where you would guess that there'd be some sort of a bat precursor, but once again, nothing. Bingo, they just show up. Here's a very highly complex mammal with all these adaptations, and bingo, they just show up at some particular moment in time fully formed as a bat. Obviously, we evolutionary biologists and paleontologists don't believe that, but at this point we don't have a good fossil ancestor for them.
This same problem occurs not only for bats, but also for flying reptiles.
When the pterosaurs first appear in the geological record, they were completely, they were perfect. They were perfect pterosaurs.
Now, as far as the evolutionary theories on the origin of birds is concerned from dinosaurs, one thing that's kind of puzzling is that it's not, remember this group over here, the bird-hipped dinosaurs, right? Within this group, there's a group called the ornithopods, the bird-footed dinosaurs. And I've already mentioned that the vast majority of these have bird-like beaks, so a lot of bird-like characteristics if you want to get down to it. But it's not from the ornithischians that it's believed that birds evolved, but actually from the sauropods. From a group of sauropods, it's believed that birds originated from one of these groups of dinosaurs. But nonetheless, it's a very, very common explanation that the dinosaurs have gone extinct because of a huge asteroid impact or potentially volcanic activity as well. A tremendous ecological shift took place that eventually forced the dinosaurs into extinction. There's a lot of problems with this. And I think there's much better evidence to support that the fossils that we find were actually the animals that were killed during the global flood. But you can point to things like animal graveyards. There are huge animal graveyards, and not just of dinosaurs, but we're talking graveyards that total into the thousands of animals can be found in the fossil record. And it's one of the most ridiculous explanations I've seen for animal graveyards is that this is kind of the traditional place where these animals would go to die. Because they find huge graveyards of fossilized elephant bones. They found a cave full of rhinoceros. A cave full of rhinoceros. But this is just like the place where traditionally they would go to die. And that's the common explanation for these graveyards. It's nothing more ridiculous I've ever heard. Like an elephant's just going to, go, this is where I saw, I'm getting kind of old now. I'm going to go wait where my mom died and, just going to stand around there until it dies. It's ridiculous. An animal dies where it becomes lame or caught by predators. And when you find these graveyards, these are almost certainly a huge herd of animals that died together during some kind of a major catastrophe. But like I say, they found like 40 allosaurs in Utah back in 1940, but they have found literally hundreds in some cases, and in some cases into the thousands.
At Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta, Canada, 10,000 Centrosaurus dinosaurs were discovered with alligators and crocodiles.
The animals that we find in the Centrosaurus bone bed include anything that was alive when the Centrosaurus was alive, of course, but they are basically freshwater fish, alligators, crocodiles, mammals, lizards.
This alligator resembles these prehistoric remains, contradicting Darwin's predictions that animals change dramatically over time.
Living fossils is another major argument against their explanation, because we find many, many animals alive today that were alive at the time of the dinosaurs and remain unchanged. Now, this argues more than just against the extinction of the dinosaurs, but we find reptiles. There's a number of reptiles, the tuatara and the crocodile, both are identical. Lived at the time of the dinosaurs. We find them fossilized along with dinosaur bones, but they're alive today, basically unchanged. Now, if the conventional explanation, if the secular explanation of the fossil record is correct, then the Earth's ecology everywhere has changed dramatically and repetitively over time. Because the fossil record are sequences of different types of sedimentary rock. You have some sandstone, which would form in one kind of environment. Some shale, which would form in another kind of environment. Some limestone, which would form another kind of environment, all layered on top of one another. As if in that area, the ecology of the area, the type of biome that existed there changed dramatically. But we find animals, lots and lots of living fossils that are identical. And this is a short list. I just put a few on here that date back into the hundreds of millions of years. But we also find animals that are alive today that are thought to have gone extinct back at the time of the dinosaurs. The coelacanth is probably one of the best known examples. But the coelacanth was thought to have gone extinct at the time of the dinosaurs, 65 million years ago, because in all the layers of rocks above it, the coelacanth is absent. Okay, so it was thought to have gone extinct back at the time of the dinosaurs. Then lo and behold, one day a fisherman produces one. They find them live, and now they know where they exist. The coelacanth was also thought to have been a transitional form between fish and amphibians. It's one of the fish they call the lobe fin fish. It had these addition of these fleshy lobed fins rather than the ray fin fishes like most of them are. And it was thought that these lobed fins, these big fleshy fins, allowed it to eventually adapt to life up on land. But we ended up finding these deep in the Indian Ocean off the coast of Madagascar, which is the reason why they went undetected for so long. But now the fishermen know where they live, and they're out there trying to pull them up because they're worth big bucks now and stuff. And so, although they survived the dinosaur extinction, they may not survive us much longer. But we also find a lot of dinosaurs, and I've actually found more than one picture of a hadrosaur like this, but we find lots of dinosaur fossils that are completely intact, skin and all. You know, this is a hadrosaur. And you remember how big the hadrosaur was? This thing did not die and then was slowly buried by sedimentary rock like the conventional explanation. For this thing to be buried skin and all, or for this thing to be fossilized skin and all, it had to have been buried before it had a chance to decompose, before its skin even had a chance to rot off. And so it was almost certainly killed by the sedimentary rock that entombed it and later led to its fossilization. And fully articulate fossils like this are not at all uncommon. They also, back in 2005, you may have seen this, they found a T-Rex thigh bone. In the process of transporting it, they dropped it. And when they dropped it, it exposed tissue inside the bone that looked like connective tissue or cartilaginous type tissue. It was soft and stretchy. When they stretched it, it would snap back. They also found what appeared to be blood vessels and maybe even red blood cells. There's a lot of debate about it, and they're not quick to release results that tend to go against their views, but nonetheless, obvious evidence that that animal was buried and buried rapidly by the sediments that again led to its fossilization. So I think there's strong evidence to argue against the conventional explanation of how dinosaurs went extinct, and instead good evidence to support that the fossils that we find are animals that were actually buried very, very rapidly, probably during the global flood of Noah. Now, one of the big questions that always comes up, okay, assuming this is all true, they were alive at the time of the flood, and the Bible says that all the animals that were alive at that time were brought to Noah. God actually brings those animals to Noah, it says, and puts them on board the ark. Could they fit on board the ark? I mean, these animals were big. I mean, really, really big. So could they fit on board the ark? Well, we've got to keep in mind just how big the ark was. 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high. This was an enormous, enormous vessel, okay? And how many dinosaurs would have actually been required? Now, I can't say with any certainty how many kinds there are, because we really don't yet understand how much an animal can change, okay? But when we look at breeding histories of animals like the dogs and the cats and these kind of things, there's an extraordinary amount of variability that was available to them, and they've been able to change quite dramatically. But you might be able to argue that there are just 7 main groups of dinosaurs. Now that's an arguable point. There may in fact be more than one kind up in here for some of these. But there are several main groups, and it's very, very possible that those may represent the major kinds of dinosaurs. It's possible that there may have only been one pair of each of those 7 types on board the ark. Look at the Ceratops family, the family of Ceratops. There's a lot of variability within that family of dinosaurs, but no more than is available for other animals that we've been able to breed extensively into all kinds of types. You know, so it's very possible that there was one pair of Ceratops on board the ark. The Hadrosaurs is similar. There's a whole bunch of different hadrosaur species, but again, the variety there is not so extreme that it would not be plausible to accept that there was one pair of hadrosaurs on board the ark. Then we consider the size of these things. Remember the T-Rex, you know, some of these things were really, really big, but when you look at the variation of sizes within the Tyrannosaur family, these are the genuses, the genera of Tyrannosaur within that, or in that family. The Tyrannosaurus is that one right there. But there were much, much smaller species of Tyrannosaurs. God wouldn't have brought the biggest genus of the Tyrannosaur family and put that one on board the ark. You would have got one of these more normal-sized ones, one that would have been much more manageable. And you can look at the Ceratops, basically the exact same thing. These are the Ceratops, these are the various genuses from the Ceratops family. Again, you wouldn't have taken the biggest one. There's the Triceratops. You wouldn't have taken one of the bigger ones. On average, these things were no bigger than a bull or a cow. These things were not that large on average. Then look at the growth curve. This is the growth curve of the Tyrannosaurs. Okay? Just like, you think about your, middle school kids, okay, or whatever. So they start off kind of slow, and then all of a sudden, bam, middle school, pop, growing out of shoes about once a month or something. You wouldn't have picked you know, a tyrannosaur, you wouldn't have picked one of these that were out here 25 years old or whatever. You would have taken one, you know, maybe 7 years old. Take them before they hit the big growth spurt, but they're nice and stable and healthy. And remember, God brought these animals and brought them to Noah to put them on board the ark. The selection would have been very, very ideal for manageability, for health, all these kind of things. So I think if we look at this thing realistically, there was plenty of room on board the ark for the dinosaurs. I don't see any difficulty there whatsoever. So, assuming that's true, that they were alive at the time of the flood, since they're an overwhelming part of the fossil record, since they could have all been put on board the ark, they would have been released afterwards, and then people after the flood would have known about dinosaurs. If the biblical timeline is correct, as we know it from the genealogical record, the flood occurred about 1,500 years after the creation, or about 4,500 years ago. Okay? So people, if they, you know, that lived after the flood would have known about them, and we should be able to find archaeological evidence for the existence of dinosaurs. Okay? So I know I want to take a break. This is where we're coming back. I want to point to archaeological evidence of recent dinosaurs. So, do you guys want to say anything about the break? Take a quick break and... Okay, so when we start looking for evidence of dinosaurs in recent history, one of the things that we got to remember up front is that the word dinosaur itself is very, very new. Okay? Originally coined about 1841, 1842, when the creationist by the name of, a creation paleontologist by the name of Richard Owen used the word in a lecture for the first time. But dinosaurs had only recently been discovered. To my knowledge, maybe off by a year or two here, the first dinosaur discovered was the iguanodon, which was discovered in 1822. 1822. And they found a tooth of an iguanodon and took it to an expert, the zoologist, and he thought it looked like an iguana's tooth, a really big iguana's tooth. They called it the iguanodon, first dinosaur discovered. But the word dinosaur itself is relatively new, again meaning terrible lizard. But up until this word was coined very recently, 1840s, these animals, these kind of animals were just collectively known as dragons. Now, so one of the things we also got to keep in mind is not only are we looking for evidence of dragons, the word dragon has taken on a lot of mythological meaning, and there's a lot of fictitious records out there, I'm sure. But what we're we need to look for is records, depictions, and descriptions, historical depictions and descriptions of animals that are just collectively referred to as dragons. Dragons, to say that dragons have been significant in ancient histories would be a terrible understatement. You can find them everywhere. They're on the Chinese zodiac. You know, every animal on the Chinese zodiac is an everyday common animal, known to everyone, and the dragon. Right there in the Chinese zodiac. We can find them on flags. There are cities named after people, after either dragons or the person who killed a dragon. We find them on city seals. Every natural history book before the 1800s contains descriptions and, in cases, if possible, depictions of dragons. Okay? Now, whenever you see pictures like this, one of the things you got to do is overlook the fact that there are some oddities to it and look at it for the basic elements that it contains. Okay? Now, most dinosaurs had one of two types of mouths. Either they had big teeth, like a lion, or they had beaks, like birds. Okay? And so when people were describing these kind of things, they would tend to say, well, it kind of had a mouth kind of like a lion. And they would end up drawing, well, some guy that's going to draw that out doesn't know how to draw the rest of the head, except to draw the rest of the head also look like a lion. So I find a lot of these depictions end up having heads that look more like cats than what we would recognize. But I think it's from the description itself, from the tiny type of teeth that they saw. It had teeth like a lion. But let's look at the rest of this. Now, this actually came from a real a record of a shepherd who had seen a dragon while out with his sheep. But look at this thing for what it actually has. a long neck and a long tail, 3 fingers, 3 toes, and look, it's got a crown-like structure on its head. These are the basic characteristics of most theropods. Okay? Long necks, long tails, 3 fingers, 3 toes, and a great many of them had what you would describe, if you saw this, to be a crown-like structure on your head. Now let's look back at that picture again, and instead of criticizing that poor shepherd, think about whether you would have been able to give a better description of that thing had you seen it. Huh? Would you have stood around and took notes of the kinds of color patterns and how the light shimmered off its scales and stuff? Man, you would have been boogieing the other direction, you know what I mean? But, I mean, and realistically, how far off was it? You know, I'm not saying this is the exact animal that guy saw, but when you look at these, generally speaking, I found a lot of descriptions and depictions that fit dinosaurs I could kind of recognize from looking at some of these things. Okay? We also got to keep in mind that when we look at some of these accounts, that the word serpent has changed through time. A lot of the records refer to them as serpents or dragons. And often there are many, these ancient histories, these ancient cultures had many names for dragons. The dragons were known by different names in different areas or in different countries or regions. But not only were there several types of dragons described, but they had different names in these different areas, sometimes referred to as serpents. But, like I say, the meaning of the word serpent has changed. In Old English diction, a serpent was a reptile with a long neck and a long tail. A snake itself is a legless serpent. So they would refer to these things just as serpents. The word dragon is in the Bible on several occasions in the King James, derived from the word tanyan. In later editions, it was translated as monster in some cases, in serpent in others. So we can find it mentioned in several cases. Isaiah 27:1. In that day the Lord with the sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Leviathan is described in length in Job. Now this is just a small excerpt, but you should go back, if you haven't read it, and read the full description of Leviathan. Now it's important to also comment on the fact that prior to mentioning Leviathan and then another one called Behemoth, God describes lots of animals. Job had gone through a terrible ordeal, if you haven't read the book of Job. And rather than giving Job an explanation, like we tend to do, we tend to question God. Something bad happens to us, right? We tend to question God. God, why did you let this happen to me? No one was more deserving of an explanation than Job. But what God did, and the message we should take home from that book is, all God did was describe himself as the creator of the universe, and describes the creation, the creation of, in particular, some of the animals to Job. And he finishes his declaration of himself as creator by describing Leviathan and Behemoth. Okay? The two of them, probably the most awesome animals that he created, at least those that were known to Job and his friends. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook? Around his teeth there is terror. His strong scales are his pride, shut up as with the tight seal. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning torches. The sword that reaches him cannot avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He regards iron as straw, bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones are turned into stubble for him. Now, some translations or commentaries will try to claim that Leviathan was just an alligator or crocodile, but the language used here just is much more. It was a much more substantial animal than a crocodile or alligator. Javelins and arrows. I mean, we can slay alligators or crocodiles with these kind of implements. Behemoth. Look at the behemoth which I made along with you, which feeds on grass like an ox. So it's a herbivore. What strength he has in his loins, what power in the muscles of his belly. His tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are close knit. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like rods of iron. Many Bible commentators will state that Behemoth was either an elephant or a hippopotamus. The animals that we know of today Because these commentators don't believe that dinosaurs were alive after the flood, because of the traditional secular paleontological interpretation of the fossil record and where dinosaurs fell in the evolutionary history that eventually culminated with man. But they were alive and known to Job and his friends. Now, if we read it has a tail that sways like a cedar. If you've ever seen an elephant's tail or a hippopotamus tail, it by no means sways like, they even flick it around like that, you know. Even if it's not the size of it that's a reference to, it doesn't sway like a cedar, okay? So if we think about what kind of animal might possess such a tail, neither of these two things really fit, you know what I mean? Elephant, I don't know, maybe. Oh, maybe we don't know what the elephants look like. Or the hippopotamus, no. Most people that read this believe that this was probably one of the big sauropods. One of the, again, Saurischian dinosaurs, the big lizard-footed. But we can find lots of records, descriptions and depictions of dinosaurs. Herodotus describes what sound definitively like pterosaurs. Okay, Herodotus was a was a Greek historian. This description dates to the 5th century BC. There is a place in Arabia situated very near the city of Buto, to which I went on hearing of some winged serpents. And when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities as it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of a water snake, but he has wings without feathers, and as like as possible to the wings of a bat. I mean, that's a pterosaur. We know of no other animal that would fit that description. And a lot of critics, when they see these kind of descriptions or depictions, like I'm going to be showing you, they tend to claim that what these people had seen were fossils. But from fossils, you cannot get that kind of information without really scrutinized and close examination. That these animals actually had membranous wings is not something that's typically preserved in fossil form. There's an apocryphal chapter of the book of Daniel that contains a description of a dragon. It's a chapter. It's in the Catholic Bible. It's not in the Protestant Bible. It's possible that its removal, but I'm not advocating one way or the other. Okay, just meant its removal might have been due to the fact that the early translators again didn't believe that animals like this existed at the time of Daniel. Nonetheless, there's a chapter, apocryphal chapter 41, that's called Bel and the Dragon, that is an encounter between Daniel and that reads like this. And in that place there was a great dragon, which they of Babylon worship. Now, to understand this completely, there was an encounter just before this. They were worshiping an idol and coming in and giving it food every day. And in the morning they would return and the food would be gone. And the king proclaimed to Daniel that this was evidence that this God was a real God eating this food. And so Daniel devised a test to show that people were actually coming in and eating the food. Okay? And so after this, he mentions the dragon that they were also worshiping. And the king said unto Daniel, wilt thou also say that this is of brass, like the idol? Well, he liveth, for he liveth. He eateth and he drinketh. Thou cannot say that he is no living God, and therefore worship him. Then said Daniel unto the king, I will worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But give me leave, O king, and I shall slay this dragon without sword or staff. The king said, I give thee leave. Then Daniel took pitch, fat, and hair, and did seeth them together, and made lumps thereof. This he put into the dragon's mouth. And so the dragon burst in asunder, and Daniel said, Lo, these are the gods ye worship. There is a dragon, an engraving, a carving of a dragon on the Ishtar Gate that was outside of Babylon that dates to 575 BC. Although very idealized, like many of the drawings we see, it does offer some substantiation that the people of Babylon may have worshipped these gigantic serpent-like creatures. Alexander the Great also reported seeing dragons in 530 BC. When he was going through India, it was reported that the people of India were worshiping a great serpent that was living in a cave there. It is also said that one of his generals brought back a serpent. This mosaic dates to 100 BC that shows a portion of life on the Nile, and it shows what seems to clearly be an ornithischian dinosaur. It's a quadruped dinosaur with a long neck and a long tail and what seems to clearly look like a bird's-like beak. The only animals that we know of, a quadruped animal with a mouth like that, are the ornithischian dinosaurs. Dates to 100 BC. Around 5th century, into 5th century, 6th century AD, there's an ancient manuscript known as Beowulf. It's a legendary Saxon story of a hero by the name of Beowulf. Now, most people just dismiss the whole story of Beowulf as being fictitious merely because most of the story focuses around Beowulf's killing a dragon. He was summoned by a king for whom his father was in service because the king's great hall had been terrorized by a dragon for like 12 years. And so he called Beowulf in, who comes with a contingent of soldiers, like 14 soldiers, to get rid of the dragon. He first ended up slaughtering several dragons that were terrorizing shipping lanes, brought them out, laid them out for inspection, then took on the dragon that was terrorizing the Great Hall, a dragon that they called the Grendel, which is described as walking like a man or being like a man as if it was bipedal, very stealthy apparently, was able to sneak in and grab one of Beowulf's soldiers completely undetected on one occasion. And they eventually killed the Grendel, Beowulf did, by ripping one of its arms off. And if you think about these theropod dinosaurs, that was probably one of the most vulnerable aspects of these big creatures, was their little bitty arms. And it is said, at least one author suggested, that this was a known strategy for killing these big, formidable types of dragons. Beowulf apparently lost his life later by taking on a winged serpent that was also in the area. Now, there is some substantial archaeological evidence to suggest that at least the people, the places, and buildings described in the book of Beowulf appear to be actual. So they've been able to find grave mounds. These two grave mounds are of people were verified by archaeologists to have belonged to two of the people mentioned in the legend of Beowulf. They found the hall, the great hall of the king who was being terrorized by the Grendel. They have found that hall. Archaeologists found that hall. They've also uncovered Beowulf's grave mound. There was a person named Beowulf, and his grave mound was enormous in comparison to the others in the region, the other people of that time. So a lot of archaeological evidence has established that Beowulf, many of the people, their relationships, the great halls, existed at the time and the place described in the epic Beowulf. So if the story of the dragon and that Beowulf killed is fictitious, an author wove an extraordinary amount of actual factual data into a fictitious story. It'd be very, very puzzling. Bill Cooper, I don't know if the book's back there, I didn't have time to check, wrote a book called After the Flood, in which he describes the epic of Beowulf in these terms and the significance of the Grendel, which was not the name of that particular serpent, but that was the name of those types of serpents. But he suggests that this carving that dates to between the 8th and 10th century BC, a Saxon carving, may actually show the creature that is called the Grendel in the Beowulf story. It shows what appears to be bipedal animals, one there, attacking a herd of quadrupeds. So this one seems to be turning around, looking at its attacker, but it's a huge bipedal animal that appears to be attacking another herd. Again, date between the 8th and 10th century. The gargoyle itself, the name that we apply to the water spouts that are placed on top of buildings is said to have been derived from a dragon that was attacking in a river in France. The story goes that, if I remember this correctly, a bishop ended up going out using a prisoner, managed to capture a dragon that was terrorizing this community, led it back into town, and when it got it back into town, the townspeople set upon it, killed it, burned it, and then mounted the head upon the cathedral. The head was later replaced by a sculpture, they ended up calling that sculpture what the dragon had originally been called. That was a gargoyle. But I should mention that creating water spouts like this that were carved after animals and even people goes back to the date of the Egyptians. So we've been creating these for long, long periods of time. But the name itself, the gargoyle name, seems to be derived back from this one particular incident with the dragon. There was a dragon in Poland in the 8th century. Krakow, Poland itself is named after a dragon, or after the king or person who killed a dragon there. The dragon is either called the Wawel dragon or the dragon of Krakow. This is a statue that's on the river near where the dragon's cave is reported to be. It's kind of interesting. The sculpture of this dragon will spit fire periodically, or whenever you send in a text message. You can send it a text and get it to spit fire. But I found two somewhat competing stories of the event as to whether or not the person that killed it was the king at the time or became king later. But it was apparently killed by bait poisoning, similar to the story we saw in Daniel. But that the person was a shoemaker in one account and he was a king in another account. But in both cases, killed by bait poisoning. But the cave where the dragon lived is a popular tourist site, and the cathedral above the cave where the dragon is said to have lived has bones still hanging outside on chains that are said to have come from that cave. And a plaque outside the cathedral reads, Krakus, a Polish prince, ruled AD 730 to 750. Here is the cave in which, having killed the wild dragon, he settled at Wawel and founded the city of Krakow. A carving on the Angkor Wat temple in Cambodia dates to the 12th century. Now, almost everyone can identify this. What is that a carving of? Which one? No, do you remember? This is a stegosaur. Almost everyone can recognize that that's a stegosaur. One of the most identifiable dinosaurs that there is. Now, there's two explanations for why this is not a stegosaur. Okay, either people will say that I've heard one explanation is that that's just an animal that's standing in front of vegetation. That those aren't the plates of the stegosaur, it's just standing in front of vegetation. Another is, again, that these people had simply found fossils of a stegosaur and had drawn a carving based on the fossils that they found. But one problem with this is that the plates on the stegosaur aren't actually attached to its skeleton. These are simply embedded into its dermis or deep into its skin. And they quickly become disarticulated when the animal decomposes in the process of fossilization. In fact, paleontologists did not know where they fit. And originally, they had them laying on its back like large scutes, like the ankylosaur. And it wasn't until later that they figured out that they stood upright on its back. But you can see here from this diagram that they're not attached to a skeleton. So a person finding its fossil wouldn't know that those things were standing upright like that. Marco Polo also described seeing dragons in China. This is and there are several descriptions like this from Marco Polo. Here are found snakes and huge serpents. So see, there's a difference. 10 paces in length and 10 spans in girth, which equates to like 50 feet or 10 inches. At the forepart, the front near the head, they have 2 short legs, each with 3 claws, as well as eyes larger than a loaf and very glaring. The jaws are wide enough to swallow a man. The teeth are large and sharp, and their whole appearance is so formidable that neither man nor any kind of animal can approach them without terror. Others are of smaller size, being 8, 6, or 5 paces long. What small arms up front? 3 claws? What is that? It's definitely one of the big theropods, right? One of these big beast-footed creatures. And very, very compelling. There are stones that were found in Ica, Peru, several of which had engravings of dinosaurs. Now, there's so many coming out of there now, it's kind of, these were burial stones, and they were first produced by missionaries in the 1600s that were in Peru. At this point, it's unclear exactly which of them are authentic and which of them are not. You know how tourist industries tend to cause such things. But there are several that seem legitimately to contain engravings of dinosaurs on them that date back into well into the mid-century. One of the names of dinosaurs that's mentioned in the Bible and known to ancient cultures is a basilisk. So this is, again, from a translation from the Catholic Bible, just so you can show you that that particular word, thou shalt walk upon the asp and the basilisk, and thou shalt trample underfoot the lion and the dragon. Like, see, dragons were known by many names because there are many different types of dinosaurs or dragons. The basilisk that the name is commonly applied to, although there appears to be a confusion caused at one point. You know, you know of a dragon, you've heard of these dragons, and then when you see a big reptile, that's automatically the basilisk, whatever, you know, and it would happen to be named. But the basilisk, the name actually means the king of serpents. And it was called that because it had what appeared to be a crown on its head. Now, most basilisks seem to have a similar appearance. The depictions that I saw seem to be very, very similar to this. But look at its back. It's got the plates or the scutes on its back, and it's got what looks like a crown on its head. When I saw this, it immediately reminded me of the ankylosaur. And also, look, it's got a bird's-like beak. Bird's-like beak, crown on its head, scutes on its back. I mean, that looks very much like an ankylosaur. And I think the ankylosaur probably would have been one of the last surviving because it was very, very well protected, and it wasn't very threatening in comparison to some of the others. Another scripture from the Bible. The burden of the beast of the south into the land of trouble and anguish, from whence thou come, the young and the old, the viper and the fiery flying serpent was one name that was given to some of the dragons in the Bible, the fiery flying serpent. I've heard some mention that that name might have just referred to venomous serpents, venomous snakes, or, and I've heard others mention that rather than it referring to fire breathers, that some of these may have actually had a bioluminescent quality or iridescence. In some cases, I've heard it mentioned. But regardless, the name also seems to be associated in some cases with another common name for dragons, the cockatrice. Was a common name for some dragons in this area. Differed from the basilisk in that the cockatrice is usually described as being bipedal. And legend had it that it came from a cock's egg, you know, so it came out of an egg, similar to the eggs that chickens. But it seemed to be described as having characteristics of both birds or chicken kind of animal and reptile. So they're tended to be drawn in this way to have some bird-like characteristics. Some have wings, some not. And it had a long reptilian tail. Now, before you automatically dismiss that animals like this existed, we know that they did. This is there's one other picture of a cockatrice, and look at this one. This is the ornithomimosaur. What is saur mean? Lizard, ornith, bird, mimic, lizard. That's ornament. We know animals like this existed. Animals that looked very much bird-like at the head region, but had a long reptilian tail. We know these existed. This little booklet was published in 1616 in Sussex, around Sussex, England, to describe a sighting of dragons in an area around a township that later be called Dragon's Green. It describes not only seeing the thing, but attempts to kill it, and actually the slaughtering of a dragon in a nearby community near Sussex. Some of the description here, I think, is worth reading. You'll see that there's no indication of a embellishment or the wording is just not described in fanciful terms. Just a little bit of it. It was reputed to be 9 feet or so in length and shaped almost like an axle tree of a cart. An axle, you know what an axle looks like, the axles that are on our car, and has a big gearbox in the middle and then extends out on both sides. So it was big in the middle and long on both ends. Okay? The former part, which shoots forth as a neck, is supposed to be 3 foot 9 inches length, which is what that means, and had a white ring, as it were, of scales about it. The scales on its back were black, and it was discovered that under its belly it was red. It was discovered to have 2 large feet, but the eye may be deceived, for some suppose that the serpent had no feet, and it could run as fast as a man. Very interesting. They also thought it had what looked like something trying to develop into wings on it. So they saw growths that were as large as a football on it, and it says, But God, I hope that it will be destroyed before it grows to fledge. So they saw structures on it that looked like they might eventually grow into wings. There's another booklet that was published in 1669. This was around Essex, 1669. It as well describes a dragon or serpent that was seen there, attempts to kill it. When they sent a hunting party out, they ultimately weren't able to find the thing. But then it describes another one that was killed 4 miles away in Saffron Walden, a type that they described as a cockatrice. So again, that was the kind of the more bird-like type. And the town itself still is proud. Many of these communities are still proud of their ancient heritage, where they are known by the dragon that once had been seen there or was killed there. This is a recent picture of a town sign showing the dragon around Hingham, England, where the dragon was known. I found this picture published in a 12-volume natural history book published in 1664. And although, again, looking very fanciful, when I saw this, it immediately and I've seen several like this that had what looked like small wings on its back sticking straight up. And to me, it reminded me immediately of a Dimetrodon. Okay? Maybe, perhaps not. But if you look at it, it's a quadruped with teeth, and none of the quadrupeds had teeth that I know of other than Dimetrodon. And the fact that it had wings sticking straight up, like I say, very compelling. We've also found pictographs or petroglyphs even in North America. The dating of this one, this is actually a reproduction, but this was discovered in 1879 in Arizona. In his book, I mentioned the book by Bill Cooper called After the Flood. He describes sightings of animals that sound like pterosaurs in the 1900s around the county of Wales. And I think the description is also kind of an interesting read. They said an elderly inhabitant of Pinland said that in his boyhood, the winged serpent were described as very beautiful. They were coiled when in repose and looked as if they were covered with jewels of all sorts. Some of them had crests sparkling with all the colors of the rainbow. When disturbed, they would glide swiftly, sparkling all over to their hiding places. When angry, they flew over people's heads with outspread wings, bright and sometimes with eyes too. The eyes were bright too, like the feathers in a peacock's tail. So again, that's not bioluminescence, but that's an iridescence. He said it was no old story invented to frighten children, but a real fact. His father and uncle had killed some of them, for they were as bad as foxes for poultry. The old men attributed the extinction of the winged serpents to the fact that they were terrors in the farmlands and coverts. They attributed their extinction to what? To who? Not to an asteroid, but to the fact that they were killed by humans. I found that to be a common theme. In every single account of a dragon that I found, there was also within that account descriptions of the attempts to kill it or the slaughter of the thing. And that appears to be the common theme. And it tends to be reasonable, okay? What would happen to one today? Unless we had the Wildlife Agency jump on the thing and capture it real quick. If we saw one of those running around a couple miles from here, a hunting party would be going out there quick trying to kill that thing. And that's what we tend to do. It wasn't long ago, I had a neighbor of mine, when his wife came because there was a snake in her front yard. And she wanted me to get rid of this snake. But she didn't want me to just get rid of it. She wanted me to kill it. Don't go. I went and turned it loose, but she didn't want me to turn that thing loose out there where it's just going to come back. You kill that thing. That's what we do. If it has a threatening imposition, and reptiles are about as threatening as animals get to most people. If it has a threatening imposition, and if it's in any way harmful to our livelihoods, our stock, our poultry, our cattle, if there's a harm to that, we're going to send a hunting party out and kill it. Okay? I mean, there may be other theories as to why they killed the dragons. I don't know. People in, I don't know. People eat lots of things. Maybe they taste like chicken. We don't know. We just don't know. But no, I think, this is very funny. But one of the best known accounts, there are a lot of people that were sainted for killing dragons. People became knights and saints for killing dragons. One of the best known is probably St. George. There are cathedrals built after St. George pretty much in every country in the world. I would challenge you to find one where there's not a cathedral built after St. George, one of the best known of the saints that had killed a dragon. But in looking into this, I found an extensive list. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. I just assembled this really, really quick of people who were sainted by the Catholic Church for killing dragons in the first 7 centuries AD. People that were sainted for killing dragons. And there were some interesting stories there. One of the ones that kind of caught my eye was one of them was even Martha of Bethany, who was Lazarus' sister, who apparently did move to France in a missionary capacity and died there and was buried in France. But according to the story, she was involved with the killing of a dragon that the people were afraid of, called a Tarrasque. And according to the story, she went out and fed the thing and gained its trust, led it back into town. Townspeople set upon it, killed the thing. But the Tarrasque is still featured in some Corpus Christi processions, even today. It looks to me, if you look at, go look it up. I didn't generate a picture for you. But if you go look it up, it also has scutes on its back and a big club on its tail frequently. Looks very much like an ankylosaur again. I would think one of the last probably surviving members. Now, when I started looking up, I found so many accounts of people who were sainted or missionaries. This thing caught my eye, and I kind of questioned, why would a Christian take it upon themselves to kill one of these creatures? You know, and I think there was obvious reasons for it. A missionary, a person that was trying to spread the gospel, the word of Christ, would reach some village, and everyone was afraid of these. There's some serpent out there, and everyone was terrified of this thing. Around these creatures, there tend to be a lot of superstition. They tend to refer to these in very superstitious terms, and idolatry. Okay? And I think trying to help this culture, trying to gain their trust, lead them to Christ, that would be the natural thing that they would do. They wouldn't be afraid of this thing. They have superstitious tendencies. People that believe in Jesus don't have those superstitious tendencies, would have been less afraid of the creature, would have gone out and, Martha may not have known that the people would have killed it when she brought it back in. And I'm not sure, can actually say for certain whether that tale is actually true. But you can go in and look it up. I also found lots and lots of engravings like this. This is a picture of what appears to be the lion described as Christ killing a basilisk. Remember, the basilisk was one of the ones that was kind of quadrupedal, had the crown on its head, probably an ankylosaur. But this is the lion of Christ killing a basilisk. This engraving on a cathedral in Austria dates to 1100 AD. We also got to note that many of the descriptions in the Bible that refer to dragons or serpents aren't favorable. The one in the Garden of Eden, number 1, Satan was the embodied a serpent. Okay? Also in the Revelation, you hear of Satan referred to as a dragon. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan. So the Bible refers to these serpents or dragons as being the embodiment of Satan himself. And I think some of these early Christians, seeing the way these communities were afraid of these things and knowing these references in the Bible, would have taken it upon themselves to kill these things. It's interesting thought, though, to think that not only were humans probably responsible, not some big asteroid, for dinosaur extinctions, but maybe Christians played a pretty significant role in that. Huh? Isn't that interesting? I don't know. But I found lots and lots of these kinds of things. This, again, is a picture of St. Michael killing the dragon, dating to the 4th century. You see a lot of these depictions and descriptions from history. And we also have to remember, it says in 2 Timothy, that the time will come when men will not put up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. They will turn their ears away from the truth and turn aside to myths. Although many people try to claim that the legends of dragons that are extensive in ancient cultures are themselves myths, the reality is that the myth is that these creatures lived 65 million years ago, went extinct 65 million years ago, tens of millions of years before humans ever walked the earth. When in reality, the fact is that God created not only that humans and all of these land animals on the exact same day, and they've lived on the earth until perhaps very recently. I wrote up there, if you want some more information, you can check one of our other websites. Much of what I included in here is you may find in greater detail on the Creation Wiki. We started a website like Wikipedia, except just from the creation point of view. So very extensive, takes about 500,000 hits a month, but you might want to go on there and look at some more information. Let's go to our Father and just thank him a little bit. Father, we do thank you so much that you gave us your word. Father, we would be so lost without you. We would be so lost. We thank you for sending your word that gives us such insight. And we thank you for sending your Son. That you sent your Son not to earth to die for us, Father. How much must you love us? To create this vast cosmos just for us. To watch over each and every one of us. To consider everything we do. To send your Son to ultimately die for us, Father. We are so humble. We praise you, Father. We thank you. Lord God, you are so great. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, guys.
We got a few minutes for some question and answers. I'm a little slow today.
Yeah, when you were talking about the bone that broke open and they found fleshy tissue, I'm curious what your opinion is, what they found, and why they're not telling us what it is.
I read some dialogue between the actual discoverer and the evidence she had produced and some of the publishers where she was trying to get some work done. And one of the back and forths between her was she asked, well, what evidence would convince you? You know, I've shown you the evidence that this looks like fairly fresh tissue. What evidence would convince you that what we found are hemoglobin? And the response was, there is none. That she could not produce enough evidence to convince them that what she had found were actually red blood cells and these kind of things. So it was published to some extent, but there were still a lot of questions outstanding as to exactly what was found, because those things should not exist for that long. Simply should not exist. So that was very interesting, though.
I just have a question about the fire breathing.
Mm-hmm.
You separated the dinosaurs into those two categories. Was there a separate category of the fire breathing dragons, and how do they fit into those categories of dinosaurs?
Well, Leviathan, Leviathan wouldn't have fallen into one of the categories that were up there. Now that you say that, I have to go look that up. Leviathan was clearly an aquatic reptile, so it was clearly an ocean reptile. But there are a lot of records of animals that seem to have had this kind of capability, at least in the historical records. And I think the description of Leviathan leaves no room for interpretation. That animal, his eyes just didn't glow, but it actually belched forth fire. I mean, there's really no room for interpretation there. That it was able to do that seems clear. And, we do know that there are organisms that possess incredible abilities like this. There's the famous bombardier beetle. There's a little beetle that can spit out a flaming hot gaseous mixture. And if you don't think the mouth can tolerate that, then consider the fire breathers. People are able to put a flammable mixture into their mouth and then spray that stuff out. The fact that the mouth can handle that seems very clear. Dwayne Gish, one of the famous creation scientists of yesteryear, had suggested that one of the hadrosaurs, there's a hadrosaur that has a large head crest on its head that seems to come down and connect with this nasal passage. He had suggested that one of those, that might have been a chamber that could have served that kind of purpose. Others suggested that it might have been just a resonance chamber that allowed it to make much louder and deeper calls and those kind of things. I think the question is still way open as to which of those might have been able to breathe fire and how many, but that they did seems, I think, very, very clear. The fire-flying serpent, like I said, that's kind of quite, what is it referring, did the flying ones, were able to breathe fire too? That fire-flying serpent seems to offer some support of that. Some of the historical records suggest that might have, there was a lot of iridescence there too, that they were actually shimmered like jewels, and things can look very bright. I've heard there are some people actually looking for them. There have been reports down on some distant islands of potential pterosaurs, and some of those reports have described them as glowing in the dark at night. So that's, again, a bioluminescent. We know that a lot of animals have bioluminescence. Most of the things that live deep, deep in the ocean, in the deep black, are bioluminescent. But that's not fire breathing. But still, the question is way open. I think we got to give it room. So that these animals actually were able to do that. Exactly which ones? I don't think I can say.
In the slide where the Romans were slaying the two, both of the dragons were laying on what appeared to be blankets with writing on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
In your research, do you know what that says?
To tell the truth, I tried to do some looking into that. It was more a finishing slide. I mean, I did go in and try to put an actual date on that, and was only able to determine when that Roman province was called that. It's in Latin, or at least I think it's in Latin, and I tried to go in and generate a translation of the actual title of it, and wasn't able to even get what appears to be a clear translation of it. But the province itself was established in 30 BC. So that appears to be an event in a province that was established in 30 BC. Exactly when the event took place, don't really know, and so I'm not really clear. But I wasn't able to get a lot of information on it, but.
When we discuss dinosaurs, this is a comment, not a question, it's important for us Christians to remember a very important thing, and that is that even though all secular paleontologists, and I think I can say all, strongly believe today that birds evolved from dinosaurs, if you look in your Bible in Genesis, you'll see that on day 6 the animals were created, correct? Day 6. And on day 5, the birds were created. So that biblically it's impossible for us to understand that the birds came from the dinosaurs, because the birds were created first. So when you see all of this stuff in the secular writings and publishings, and it's becoming more and more and more common that when you go to your natural history museums, you're going to start seeing all of the dinosaurs are going to have feathers. They started out, how there's this evolution of what dinosaurs look like. Well, right now, the evolution that's going on is that the depictions of dinosaurs are going to be that they all have feathers, because all secular paleontologists are strong believers in the fact that birds evolved from these dinosaurs. But, and as I just mentioned, impossible, because God created the birds first.
Chris, quick comment on that. I forgot her name. Mary was her first name. The one who discovered the collagen. What? Schweitzer. One who discovered the collagen in the fossil dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. The most recent answer I've read to that is, scientists now know that DNA and collagen can survive for millions of years.
That's a good point, though. Thank you.
It's clear from the scriptures which point out that man, before the flood, lived to be 900 years old, very commonly. That's commonly reported. And so it seemed that animals would also live a long time in that period, and the conditions on the earth have changed from before the flood until afterwards. Do you think that would have an influence on the size of the fossil bones that we find, that these animals actually grew to be very large, much larger before the flood than afterwards?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. I don't think a dinosaur ever reached the size of those that we find in the fossil record after the flood. It's very, very doubtful that they did. There are some reptiles, like sea turtles, live longer than humans. Reptiles grow as long as they live. They're really the only group of animals that continues to grow throughout their life. And it's very, very possible, being that humans live to be 800-900 years old, that reptiles lived that long, maybe even longer. And remember, the flood occurred like in the year before 1,500 years after the creation. 1450s, I don't remember the exact term that has been applied to that, but it could theoretically be possible that some of those really big dinosaurs that we see were original creations. It's conceivable, at least, But these were the very big ones that we see were unquestionably, I think, really, really old dinosaurs. Just really, really big because they're really, really old. And it's possible that after the flood, none of these creatures ever reached those sizes again. Not like the really big ones that we find in the fossil record. That's a really good point.
Okay, one more question about the fleshy material. Would they be able to extract DNA? Has anyone gotten any DNA from any dinosaurs?
Not completely intact. I mean, but that is they have been able to extract fragmentary information, but not completely intact DNA. If they did, then they could potentially resurrect one. I mean, the whole Jurassic Park thing, that is plausible. Cloning works because they take a fertilized egg, they suck out the DNA, they stick new DNA in there, and there you go, cloning. So if they found completely intact DNA from a dinosaur, and they could find a reptile that matches a living reptile that's close enough to that, they could potentially resurrect one. Sure.
With the DNA that they have found, though, how does it compare with the rest of the animal kingdom?
I can't really speak to that. I don't know if they've found enough to be able to do any kind of genomic studies, if that's what you're asking. I really don't think so. A few fragments here or there, but nothing substantial that I know of. I think there's still a lot of question whether what they found was actually hemoglobin. Or red blood cells, excuse me.
Well, thank you, Chris, for your talk. Appreciate that a lot. I really appreciated your bringing out the fact that man had so much to do with the destruction of these creatures. As many of you know, I'm part of a group that's searching for living dinosaurs. And on our website, creationgeneration.com, you'll find an article that I wrote which repeats a lot of what you said, except expands on it. One thing that I've heard from regular evolutionists is that at least 90% of the total original fauna, biota altogether, is now extinct. So we would expect most animals to now be extinct. We're only seeing a small remnant. And most of those ones that are extinct because of man. So it makes sense that the only ones we would find living today are in the nether reaches of very unsettled areas. And I'll tell you, down where we go in the Congo, we've been to places where no other, as far as we can tell, any men have been. So there's plenty of places, but they're way away from man. That's the main thing they have in common.
What's the name? Makilimbimbimbe? Or at least, yeah. There's like several names for it by the different tribes down there. There's an article on it on the Creation Wiki. By the way, we do have a lot of videos on our website too. All of the seminars from our past creation conferences are on there, but there's also a documentary that some guys put together on the dinosaur-dragon connection that's on our website. So if you go to nwcreation.net, it's on the main page. There's several seminars from last year's conference right there, and then below those you'll see one that's titled Dinosaurs in the Bible, I believe is the name of it. And you can download it to your website free. Pretty decent quality size videos.
Chris, thank you for your presentation. Very interesting and very clear. One of the criticisms leveled at creationists has to do with the fossil record, and you mentioned something I'm very interested in. They'll say, well, if all the animals were created and they all died in a flood, why does it seem that the dinosaur fossils seem to be so isolated from other animals? And you had mentioned, I think it was in Alberta, Canada, there were mammals buried with those dinosaurs. Can you speak a little bit more about that as an occurrence worldwide, or does your website have more information we could link to on that?
The question of fossil sorting is really common too, and basically what you have, the fossils that are in the fossil record aren't just all mixed together. And when fossil began in its infancy, the fact that you find certain fossils seemingly always or usually above or below other fossils convinced even early Christians that what they were looking at was not the remains of the global flood, but must indeed, like these people are suggesting, represent a history of life on Earth over hundreds of millions of years. The fact that fossils are sorted. You tend to see certain fossils below others, certain fossils above others. But if you look at it, it does follow an expected trend. And they do, there are some mammals found with dinosaurs, but they're really small. But generally a trend kind of fits the expectations of what animals would die first during a flood like this and what animals would die last. Now, we really don't know how long it took for everything to die, but there's really no biblical support for it lasting any longer than 40 days. There's a reference to 150 days, which some seem to misinterpret, but that was the length of time from when the flood started to when the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat. It began on the second month, 17th day of the month of the 600th year of Noah's life. And then the ark came to rest in the 17th day of the 7th month, 5 months later, the 600th year of Noah's life. That's 150 days. But it mentions that the floodgates of the heavens were stopped, the floodgates of the earth, the windows of the heavens were closed. It mentioned those simultaneously. Whether those actually occurred in the exact same moment, we don't know. But seemingly, theoretically, the flood itself might have lasted at least a month, maybe even a month and a half or more before everything died. Life goes on, right? So some animals that are going to be able to avoid dying until later. The ones that we expect to be buried by sediment first are those that live in the lowest habitat elevations on Earth. So the animals in the very bottom of the ocean, these kind of locations, are going to be the ones that we expect to be buried first. Those that are immobile, that are planted on the bottom, would be buried first. Those that dig into the mud would be buried first. Those are the animals that are believed to have evolved first. The ones that we would expect would have been buried first. Then you have bottom-dwelling, free-swimming creatures after that. And then you tend to move up in habitat elevation and environmental tolerance. The cold-blooded animals are found buried before warm-blooded animals. Cold-blooded animals are environmentally sensitive. If the temperature gets warm or cold, they die. A snake will die if you even submerge it in warm water. They're that sensitive. So cold-blooded animals would have died first, which are your reptiles, are cold-blooded. There's some debate about that. And then warm-blooded animals, the mammals, your birds, are the ones that are found last in the fossil record. Now, this is not an absolute fixed in stone, but a general trend. So there are exceptions that they will find here or there. They tend to explain them away as reworking. So a fossil bed will be eroded away, and the whole thing could potentially invert. The one that's eroded, that's on top, will erode first, be buried. The one that's on top was below it will be eroded next, buried on top of it. So they can explain away any inconsistency through reworking. But there does appear to be a general trend, but it fits the expectations. On habitat elevation, environmental tolerance, and humans are probably absent from the fossil record, mostly because of intelligence. An animal will just kind of herd up, oh, it's raining, but I got my dad right here with me, I'm going to stay right here. They kind of herd up, and will end up getting trapped in some canyon, and before you know it, they all get buried together because they are safety in numbers. And even in a flood condition, a human would have recognized this event for its significance. The text is not very clear, but there's no reference of rain until the flood. In specific reference to it not having rained yet early on, but no reference for it actually raining until the flood. So it's possible that it never had rained until the flood. Earthquakes, volcanoes, and perhaps even the first rain ever started at the time of the flood. Humans would have recognized this was something very, very odd, especially since some of these people had been around hundreds of years. They would have acted very efficiently to avoid this event in a big way, whereas an animal gets under a tree, gets in a cave, and lets things take their course, and they die when they die. So that's a very, very good point. But they actually have found recently a dinosaur in a mammal's stomach back in 2005 also. We've only recently found some mammals with dinosaurs, and when this discovery in 2005 was made, it shook the world because at that point it was not believed animals of that size existed, along with the dinosaurs, until they found a mammal, small mammal still, but with a small dinosaur in its stomach. So that's...
Okay. Happy Easter to all of you. And have a great Passover. Thank you.